Chautauqua County has submitted proposals in addition to the police that I mentioned for highway maintenance and construction and tax assessment functions as an example. The commission, though, also made policy recommendations, most of which will require legislation, and some even will require a constitutional amendment. One section that I would, particularly because of your interest and your activities, that I would call to your attention is a section or a chapter in our report called Informed and Active Voters. And the one thing that we recommended is that all elections be conducted either in the November general election or at one time in the spring, probably in May, for school districts and villages and so on. There are special elections, special district elections, thousands of them in New York State, that take place in December and all sorts of unusual times. Obviously, there is a very low turnout at these times. Now, I know that in some places, like Fredonia and Corning, they get pretty good turnouts for school district elections, but that's even not true in a lot of places. And with modern technology, we can certainly handle the administration of elections. I mean, you might live in one school district and another village or something like that. That's easily handleable, in our opinion. And we think that there are a lot of elected positions that don't need to be elected. Tax collectors, for example, that's an administrative position, and we didn't think should be elected. We would try to do everything to try to urge the consideration of consolidation of towns and villages, fire districts and other special districts. County boards of elections, we believe, ought to administer all the elections. You know, if you go to the New York State Board of Elections, you can't even find out the results of village elections because they have no responsibility to report to the state. And professionalization of those functions to us would make a lot of sense. A major part of our report is devoted to regional services and consolidations. Some things we think ought to be done at the county level. Example, assessing and tax collection. Another example that we've already implemented to a large degree in Chautauqua County is E911. If we have an emergency, we want somebody at that other end with the best technology to know where we live, what our fire department is, or our police department, whatever, and that is professional and able to do it instead of having separate ones in this city and that village and another in another township. Consolidating vital records, consolidation of most municipal service commissions at the county level made sense to us. Then there are a category of things that we thought could be done on a multi-county basis, particularly in rural counties. They have trouble getting health directors and boards of health and medical examiners, and why couldn't, it's not legal today to have two counties come together and do that. Worse yet, more expensive yet, is jail. There are two counties in the Hudson Valley that are mandated to build new county jails. One estimate is $70 million and the other is $95 million. They have studied it. They could save a lot of taxpayer money, even including the transportation of prisoners, and they're forbidden from doing it under current law. This makes no sense to us, and we think that it ought to be able to be consolidated. I'm not going to go into our our proposed constitutional amendments, they're pretty technical. I will say this, the confession of what didn't we do that we might have. The whole designation of towns, villages, and cities really doesn't make sense. I mean, there is a town of Hempstead has 980,000 people, yet I live in a town with 4,300 people. They're obviously not the similar kind of entity, and yet they're governed by these rules. And there are villages and towns that could merge, but only the village can get municipal electrical power from the state power authority. Why? That doesn't make any sense. And so all we did was we recommended that it needs study. As you probably know, being a legal women voters, we're required to consider a constitutional convention by 2017. And leading up to that, we think there ought to be a distinguished panel to look at this whole question. Do we realign with our cities? I mean, the city of Salamanca, I don't know the population, but it's not 10,000 people. And obviously the city of New York is 8 million people. And so maybe the same rules, the same taxing authority, and so on, should be rationalized. We didn't make specific recommendations other than that that ought to be looked at. Now, I mentioned the local government efficiency grants. We recommend the creation, and it will not cost one dime in additional state money, of a Center for Local Government Efficiency. These are people already working for the state, most of whom were our staff on the commission, and they could provide one-stop answers for local governments. They don't necessarily have to give out the grants, but they would be a valuable source for these local initiatives to make sure that every state agency is responding. If the Division of Criminal Justice Services isn't responding to the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Department, they can make sure that they would, for example. The most important recommendation in terms of taxes, in my opinion, you know, I always think of the old saying about Willie Sutton. They asked him, why do you rob banks? He says, that's where the money is. Why did we talk about school consolidation with such a fervor? Because they levy 2/3, roughly, 66% of all the property taxes in New York State are levied for school purposes. And we have 18 school districts in Chautauqua County. Absolutely makes no sense. I have sat off the record with superintendents, 2 in the South County. I guess I shouldn't name them, but there's people taking notes here. But 2 in the South County told me, 2 superintendents of schools, they said, we should be together. We're both about to retire. You know, I said, well, why don't you take the lead? You tell them that they only need 1 superintendent. That they even knew which would be the high school, which would be the middle school, and so on. Now, some good things are going on. Right here in Chautauqua County, there's a lot of talk, both in the North County and elsewhere, about combining. I personally don't think they're going far enough. We made the most controversial recommendation we made was that the Commissioner of Education, with the approval of the Board of Regents, could order consolidation without a referendum. I generally am a Democrat with a small d and believe in referendums, but in this case, you know, we had about 3,500 school districts in New York in 1950. By 1970, we were down to 700. And guess what we have now? 698. We have done nothing since 1970. And look at, for example, Southwestern Central School. How many people would like to go back and have a separate school in Lakewood, 1 in Selron, and 1 in Bustine? Nobody does. Once it's done, it's fine. Sky didn't lose its identity because they had a centralized school, and neither would Panama, or I'll single Panama because that's the district I live in, and my superintendent is well aware of my views, not all of which she shares, but